Hi, I'm Kirby Allison. I'm excited to be back here in London visiting with my good friend Wil Whiting, one of London's finest young bespoke shirt makers and one that is part of a new generation of bespoke artisans challenging the way that things have traditionally been done. Wil, nice to see you again.
Hey Kirby.
Hey, thanks for having me over.
Please come in.
Yeah, thank you.
Wil always insists on first welcoming his visitors over an extraordinarily fresh cup of coffee made with the same meticulous approach as he makes shirts.
I did my master's degree in computer science. I worked in finance and then consulting, but it wasn't really for me. I much prefer making something more tangible. I enjoyed technical drawing in school. My father always had quite an impact on how I dressed, how I came across. I think that came from the people I surrounded myself with at university and also how I was taught. I think when you're taught science, you'll look to question a lot of things, spend a lot of time analysing, and for me it's exactly the same with the shirt. It was to break down every part of it. Why is it done that way? Okay, we had these really strict rules that I was taught when I was training, which I respected and followed, but when I was doing my own thing, which I always wanted to do, it was about saying, okay, I was taught that, why am I doing it? Exactly the same as in academia. And for me that was, why did they use a machine? Or why did they use handwork? And if there was handwork in a shirt, it might have been because cost of labour was cheaper, it was cheaper than buying machinery. Some parts, that was a way that they differentiated themselves. So it was trying to understand that in all parts of the world, France, Italy, here in England, and then bring those elements into my shirts where I believed it was, of benefit.
Yeah. You know, Wil, why is it in Britain, that shirt making has always been secondary?
Well, I think it came down to the fact that shirts were underwear. So tailoring is outerwear, and shirts were something that were worn. They were worn underneath a jacket, so less emphasis was put on the fit element of the shirt. So the collars are important, and so the cuffs. The collars were replaceable, but there was less emphasis put on the specifics of the fit as there are today. We're wearing a shirt, as I am now, without a tie. This is a specific style that I've made myself to fit in with the era that we are. So on my casual shirts, there isn't a button or a buttonhole. There's no need for it. It's going to be worn without a tie.
What is your approach to shirt making?
Yeah, I think it comes to a number of areas. Transparency, trying to be open about the process, where the fabric's from, what's going into the shirt to make it what it is. Sometimes people want a certain type of collar, not just a style, but the feel of the collar. It can be fused or unfused, it can have different weightings, so it could be a very lightweight piece of interlining in the collar or cuffs, but in the same time it could be a lightweight piece that's stiff. The customer won't necessarily understand what it is that they like, but it's for me to ensure I can be able to give to them what they're looking for and what's comfortable. At the end of the day, the shirt's on the body, the suit isn't so much, so I need to make sure that the customer's underwear is comfortable. So to get the right weave of fabric, to ensure the cuff and collars are made in the right way, especially if they're being worn with or without a tie. So all these elements, including finishing. I have a number of different levels of finishing. So this is one of my part handmades, and for example the cuff is set in by hand, and that's just a purely aesthetic detail. It's if you want it to look cleaner in terms of how it's been set in, you achieve that through handwork in the same way you would see that in bespoke tailoring or couturiers. And for me, I wanted to offer that option to the customer. So I have a breadth of customers, some just buy a bespoke shirt because they want it to fit right. So they might just go with a machine finished shirt. Some are looking for something a little bit more. They're more interested in the finishing, so they'll go for something with some handwork in. But the most important part always is fit. number one, I'm a bespoke shirt maker, it's got to fit right. But I want to be able to give the customer more options. So whether that's a regular shirt to be worn with a tie, or a casual shirt without, or a Lido collar or camp shirt, or an overshirt, or something that I've been doing more recently as a shirt jacket, is to be able to give the customer as much of an offering in relation to shirts as I can.
You know, one of the first things that really caught my attention with you, Will, was, you know, just the beautiful roll of your button-down collars and your Lido collars. I mean, you know, not only do you do exceptional, you know, dress shirts to be worn with the tie, but I really was particularly interested by some of these really rare and more uncommon shirt styles that you just don't see anyone making, much less innovating.
Like I was mentioning about my father before and the impact he had on me, but then going beyond that was how you look, without forgetting shirt or suit or whatever, just how you come across and how what you're wearing makes you look, but then how you feel in what you're wearing. So to the button down specifically, is I've looked around at lots of different styles. I noticed that this sort of rolling effect here can give quite a nice aesthetic, and to bring that part of the button down. And it also comes down to construction as well, the way it's made. So the pattern is the most important part, but then the different weight of interlining in the collar creates that finish.
So what was the process by which, you know, you approached developing, you know, kind of your signature collars?
I think it's been an iterative process. I was taught a set of rules, I followed that. I wasn't necessarily happy with the result sometimes. You then change around the pattern, see what impact that had, interlinings like we were saying before, but sort of making, remaking until you end up with something that you like. That's it really. But in terms of, you know, that's the button down, but if a customer is looking for a shirt to be worn with a tie, I think that becomes more challenging, because I'm looking for the shirt to fit correctly with the suit jacket. So I really need the customer to have the suit jacket with them. I want to make sure the point lengths are correct in terms of where the lapel of the jacket is. Also to make sure it's comfortable. So I remember wearing some ready-to-wear shirts which had a stiff collar stay in, and every time I sort of moved my neck one way or the other, they would jolt into my body, and that's just uncomfortable. So with the sort of rules of collars, you want to make sure that the point length, the spread, so this part to here, is right for the person who's wearing it. So sometimes you can't give someone a cutaway collar because it just doesn't fit well on them, or it doesn't really suit them. So it's about managing expectation of what the customer is asking for and looking for as well.
How many fittings do you normally have, you know, in the bespoke process?
It really can differ, but no less than 2 fittings, no less. Why? Some people might say, oh, if you can't get it right on the first fitting, you're no good. That's their opinion. My view is, similar to couturiers, I'm fitting something to the body. If you want it to be right, you can have a fantastic formula, which I feel I have, but I've still got to fit it on you. There's things that you can't always see that are happening. So first process is similar to tailoring, like a base fitting, basting pieces of the shirt together, fitting it on you, draping it over your body, seeing what happens. After that, I go back, I change the pattern that I made for you, make another shirt up with the collar, with the cuffs, the sleeves in, and that's more similar to the finished shirt. And that way I can speak with you, and we can look at the collar in the mirror, and we can talk about what you like or dislike. I can amend the collar on you. I can assess if I think the sleeves are the right length. Okay, that's very simple. Sometimes a customer thinks the sleeves are too long, but I've also got to make sure that they can move and they're comfortable in the shirt. I can make a shirt look beautiful, but you probably can't do too much in it. I mean, I always want to try and create the best looking shirt I can, with the most amount of movement, but it's always a bit of a sliding scale. So you want to make it look beautiful, sometimes you have to compromise.
All right, so here we are. This is a nice little workshop.
This is your, let's call it based fitting shirt. It changes a little bit depending on each customer. Always 2 fittings for minimum. This one is specifically to drape on you because you've got quite slanted shoulders, and I want to make sure that we get the slopes right. Balance and the slopes of your shoulders are the most important part. If they're not right, the shirt will never be right, and you'll be fighting with it. So no matter how well it fits on the sleeves or the body, balance has got to be right.
So I've never seen this fitting before. I mean, is this a typical fitting?
So for me, it's doing as many fittings as required to get the fit right. I don't want to do too many, but I feel on this occasion, this is right for you.
Because of the sloping shoulders.
Yeah, and I've put excess fabric in here so I can unpick the shoulder, I can play around with it, depending on, you know, whether someone's forward shoulder or not. Those things need to change.
Okay.
And they're best done at this stage rather than making up a shirt and then not really being able to unpick it.
Yeah. And you were saying that, you know, this sets the foundation of the shirt.
Yeah.
So this is the most important thing to get right.
That's right. And once that's right,
you can add the other pieces.
Ticked off and move on.
Okay. Great. Well, I guess I'll put it on.
Here we go. So at the moment, as it's just a drape fitting, I'm just pinning the 2 fronts together without the buttons. And then what I'm going to assess is just how these pieces just drape on you. I can unpick parts if required. I can really see what's happening. I mean, we can see here already, as I noted when I saw you initially, you've got a slight drop right. But I don't like to cut for that straight away. I want the body to tell me what's going on, because sometimes we see a drop right and it doesn't come into play. Historically, in some books, there's negativity towards putting darts in a shirt. So for me, if you look at ladies' shirts, there's darts all over it because they've got a lot of shape. So if I want to try and get more shape into your back, I can't keep taking from the side seams, I need to take from the back of the shirt. So I put no problem with putting darts in. They're going to be all symmetrical if you've got a striped shirt anyway, so they're not going to look ugly.
How much can you do without darts?
It all depends on your body. So if you get thinner here, we can keep taking from here, but you're not. And typically I draw out what someone looks like, so you're not a perfect circle. You're more of an oval. So if I keep taking from the side seams, it's going to end up too tight here, and there's going to be too much in the front and the back. So we can't do it. And that comes back to your point earlier on about analysing the whole process. You know, I was taught one thing, but why was I taught that way? Well, because someone sort of just made it up, or they had a reason for it. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to unpick this front shoulder line and just see if anything else wants to happen. So instead of just pinning, I'm actually moving the seam, displacing the seam. Here I'm actually pinning, taking out the excess because you've got quite a curved back of the shoulder, and that normally happens with more sloped shoulders. I've also given extra fabric on the shoulder lengths. If it's there, I can take it away. If there isn't any there, I can't. And similar to the tailor, I'm actually just going to sort of chalk where I think the new shoulder line could be.
And I guess the original shoulder line is what's marked and pinned?
Yeah, plus an excess.
Okay.
In case I need to square it off or make it more slanted. So I've given you a slight drop left. How are you feeling now in terms of around the body? Is it feeling tight in anywhere? Is it feeling tight on the front?
No, I think it feels good on the bottom.
Okay, so my preference is to put darts into the back of this shirt. I'd recommend that on you. Just going to pin out the position of where I feel they should be. I think it's looking good. Shoulders look right. Okay, so I feel that we're looking at this area now. This is looking very clean.
Okay.
So you've got quite a sloped shoulders, drop right. I've corrected that now. Also, this area of the body is very rounded, and by pinning out this excess, we've taken that into consideration. We're going to get more shape through the back, as you can see here with the darts, and to allow for the seat, which is the posterior. So now, as always, just make some notes on the fitting to make sure that they're changed on the pattern. Every change that I'm made now will get recorded here. So, and I'm also making a note of what I've seen here today and the changes that I'm making to ensure that there's no discrepancies when I'm making that change in the pattern. Also, in a moment, I'll take some photos of you, because in my mind, without the photos, if I think about what I saw, it would be different to perhaps what the photo will show. And sometimes photographs always show more problems than you can sometimes see in real life. So it's a great way tomorrow or the week later when I'm making the pattern to reflect back to that. So if I show you on the mannequin here, we've got the collar in, sleeves are in with the cuffs, no gauntlets. There's no point in wasting valuable time for the seamstresses to make things that aren't going to be used at all, and they don't have an impact on the fit. But the collar's important. It's got the right interlinings in here, which I think the customer requested, and then they can tell me what they think. And then you can see all the elements, a little bit of tie space here, a little bit of, it's quite a soft feel, it's quite lightweight.
And this is fused, will the finished
fused?
Be fused?
It's up to you. Typically I fuse, because unless someone's understands how to press an unfused collar, it can end up looking quite bad.
So if I have someone that knows how to press, then would you...
And you like an unfused collar, then that's what you can have. Yeah, of course. Actually use a Lumo for the trial. They've looked after me, and all that enables me to do is put a fabric on you that's actually realistic to what you're going to get. There's no point in me putting a fabric that's nothing like what you're going to wear, because it might drape completely differently. So yeah. So knowing you're a sort of tailoring shirt maker nerd, I hope that's take that positively. Yeah. Is I just want to show you a few things, the changes that I've made on you. Okay. I just want to show you what I'll change on the pattern, so you understand what I'm talking about. So you can see this is your front shoulder slope, and this is the armhole. So one side will need to drop a little bit more, so you'll end up with one side of the pattern cut lower, and then we'll cut the armhole lower as well, because we saw some issues going on here in the trial shirt. So that takes into consideration a left-right body. The left side of your body is different to the right side.
Now, is this on the first trial symmetric, where you just have one side?
Yeah. If I can clearly see a
huge difference,
I'll cut it. I was always taught to cut everything on the first pattern and try and nail it on the first time. But sometimes I think that can open up too many problems. You know, you think you've seen something you may not have. Then we're going to start to slope more off here, because of this part of your back of your shoulder. This is the yoke, as you can see here. This is just one piece at the moment. Yep. This can be chopped in half, the allowance can be put on, it can come a split yoke. And then we have your sleeve, which hasn't been put in yet. This is the front and the back of the sleeve. All my sleeves are set in, and everything is fully matched if it's a striped shirt. So there's the point for the center, and that would match up with the yoke, so we can make sure
the stripes
match up.
Because you do an incredible amount of detail just in pattern matching.
Yeah, of course. And a great example of that is, what is the shirt over there, an overshirt on the mannequin. That one is done in Pendleton fabric from Oregon, and that's a Native American style of pattern fabric, and that's been matched in a similar way to you'd see a suit. So you've got the stripes going through the sleeve here, going through the body, to the other sleeve.
Pockets.
Yeah, everything. And then another part just to show you is, as I said, I've always tried to look in, research every part that's involved within the shirt, and that comes onto the shears. So here's a pair of Highness shears. They're probably over 100 years old. It's difficult to detect exactly because there's no date on when they were made, but from looking back at the history of the company, we can see that that company ended around 100 years ago and a new one took over. And they're the shears that I use today. The Japanese make some fantastic shears as well, but it's a way for me to understand what are the right shears that I should be using. As technology's gone on, new machinery is being brought in to cut shirts or anything in that discipline. But years ago, these are a pair of, I think, 15.5-inch shears. They can be used by tailors to cut heavyweight fabric, but they could also be used to cut multiple pieces of shirt fabric at once. So if you were a ready-to-wear cutter, maybe 50 to 100 years ago, you might be using these to cut out 10 to 20 pieces of fabric.
Wow, that's incredible.
Whereas now you would be using
the blade.
Yeah, or something else to cut it. These are a pair of trimmers, so you could cut out a shirt with these. I actually use these to cut out my paper patterns, so I wouldn't mix shears for cutting out fabric and paper. I think they're great for cutting out paper, but if I wanted to cut out fabric with them, they'd need sharpening, and then they need to be sharpened by someone who knows what they're doing. Otherwise they can ruin the shears. So I use a pair of Japanese trimmers that do a fantastic job. Next is a cutting knife, which a lot of British shirt makers use. I don't think many other places, maybe in India. This will enable you to get more accuracy. It also enables you to cut multiple pieces of fabric at once. You could use a rotary cutter, but that's going to be difficult to cut out lots of pieces at one time.
So stripes would all be cut individually?
Yes, for me. And
you cut here?
Yes, cut everything at this table. You need to make sure when you're cutting stripes out that you're laying the fabric out. So in tailoring, when you're cutting, it's known as a striker, but in shirt making, typically the person making the pattern also cuts out the shirt fabric. And yeah, you need to make sure it's laid out correctly to make sure the checks and stripes match up on the shirt. Yeah. So this is a book about fabric, and it goes into the detail of different weaves, so poplins, twills, oxfords. And actually this is a really great resource that goes into a lot of detail about how fabric is made, and it's quite difficult to get that information today.
Yeah, surprisingly technical. Huh. Textiles and wear and wash.
And also it goes on to, if you look here, there's a hole appearing in the fabric, and that comes in to speak about sort of densities of stitch densities, and if the stitch density is too small and the fabric's quite fine, then sometimes it can break at the seam. So there's a lot of conversation about the higher the stitch density, the better quality the shirt, but actually that's really a myth. That's just a basic sort of like a marketing tool just to try and improve the quality, improve sales, but that's not the case. Certain different fabrics need different stitch densities.
Yeah. So as I've, really begun to wear, dress shirts, more often, and specifically my white dress shirts, because there's, so many different qualities of white fabric. I've almost exclusively found that I prefer a Super 100 or 120 over, a Super 200, because one, the heavier weight fabric drapes better, it wears with less wrinkles. It's actually, it looks better at the end of the day than something that, quote unquote is, finer.
Yeah. I think that comes down to a number of things. So we're talking about all of these are quality fabrics, some are just more luxurious. So the ones that sometimes are much more luxurious, like a 2-fold 200, doesn't mean it's going to last longer. So again, it's just explaining that to the customer. The same thing comes on to stitch density, as we spoke about before. The higher the stitch density, it doesn't mean that the quality of shirt is better. Okay, it sometimes requires a little bit more skill to sew in a straight line with high stitch density, but the fabric being sewn needs to be taken into consideration.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for having me in the workshop.
My pleasure.
I really can't wait to see these shirts, and I guess we'll have one more fitting the next time I'm in London, you know, to test out the rest of the shirt. And then after that, you know, I've ordered 6 shirts. Your minimum's 5, but I said let's just do half a dozen. Then would you make all 6 of those up, or would you make 1 or 2?
I'd make the first one.
Okay.
You'd get to wash and wear that and see how you get on. I'm confident you'll have a positive experience, but I wouldn't want to rush the process. And then if you're truly happy, then we can make the rest. And then if it comes on to different collar styles. Sometimes I'd do a different collar on you as a trial. It all depends.
Yeah.
Depends what you're looking for.
Yeah. Great. Well, thanks again for having me in the workshop, and I can't wait to get the shirts. Yeah. Cheers.
If you enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up, and please subscribe to our channel and turn on your notifications by clicking the bell to the right of the subscribe button so that you can learn whenever we release new videos. If you have any questions or comments about anything we discussed on this video, please ask them in the comments section below. And of course, please visit hangerproject.com, where we have the largest, most comprehensive collection of luxury garment care and shoe care accessories in the world, as well as many other incredible products for the well-dressed. And while you are there, subscribe to our newsletter to receive notifications of new product launches, promotions, as well as a weekly digest of all the videos we publish here on our YouTube channel.